God damn, what a fight. Tonight was Petr Yan's night, but God doesn't give you a burden heavier than you can carry. Tonight was his night, and I'll come back stronger. I always do, and I always come back stronger. These are Deiveson Figueiredo's words after his loss to Petr Yan. And Figueiredo has never struck me as a man who doesn't believe what he says. I would never come before you and tell you that this man's a liar. When he says he believes God doesn't give burdens heavier than you can carry, I know he says this from experience. This man came up from truly a tough situation to build himself into a world champion. And when he says he's going to come back stronger, because he always does, I know it's from experience, having the mentality that when you get knocked down, you get back up, dust yourself off, and try even harder. I, for one, definitely believe Deiveson Figueiredo believes what he says. Which is why I feel so sorry for him. Because I can't imagine what it's going to feel like when he's laying on his hospital bed and he can't breathe because everything hurts. And he can't sleep because his head is throbbing. And he's running through every life choice he's ever made to try to figure out what he did wrong. Because he either must have messed up or his God must hate him for making him carry the burden of going to war with Cory Sandhagen. Nobody is the same after stepping into the octagon and going to war with Cory Sandhagen. I could go over the wins, the highlight reel knockouts, the flashy techniques that have made him a fan favorite, but I'd rather tell you something even more impressive. Something you haven't even realized. The only fighter in the UFC who has ever gotten a win over Cory Sandhagen and went on to win his next fight was Aljamain Sterling. However, Sterling was only able to have this distinction because after 4.5 rounds of being beaten from pillar to post by Petr Yan, he won after Yan was disqualified for hitting him when he was down with an illegal knee. Sterling then had to take a year off from injuries that happened before the Petr Yan fight. Because again, no one leaves unscathed when they fight Cory Sandhagen. So the UFC booked Petr Yan against Cory Sandhagen, and how did that work out for him? While the judges awarded him a bogus split decision win on the night, this was a prime example of winning the battle, but not the war. Because the toll that Cory Sandhagen makes you pay is so high that Yan went on to get dominated by Sterling, a man that he had already proven he was better than when he was on top of his game. But the husk that Sanhagen left behind was ragdoll. Not only that, but this would put Yan on his first 3-fight losing streak of his career. And while Yan was on a 3-fight skid, Sanhagen went on to rattle off 3 wins for himself. But what about Cory Sandhagen's title eliminator against TJ Dillashaw? Again, incompetent judges awarded the win to Dillashaw. But how well did that work out for TJ? He was forced to take over a year off after having to deal with the burden that is Cory Sandhagen. Before his body fell apart, even while trying to be held together by EPO in his return loss to Sterling before being forced to retire. Not even the boogeyman of the division, Umar Nurmagomedov, could get a win after dealing with the burden that is Cory Sandhagen, as the walking corpse that he sent to fight Merab was just thrown around. Umar, who was a 2-1 favorite going into that fight against Merab. That is exactly what happens when the odd makers don't take into account the Cory Sandhagen effect. In fact, 8 out of the last 10 fighters couldn't get back into the win column after their encounter with Cory Sandhagen. Rafael Sunsao would go on to lose 3 of his last 4 matches before retiring. Cory Sandhagen's spinning wheel kick not only sent Marlon Moraes to the Shadow Realm, but it started a 7-fight losing streak. Cory Sandhagen's jumping knee destroyed the iron chin of Frankie Edgar and sent him on a 3-fight knockout losing streak before he retired. Rob Font lost his next one and wisely decided to take a year off after dealing with the burden that was Cory Sandhagen. One of the only 2 fighters that did get a win after stepping into the octagon with Cory Sandhagen was Song Yadong. And the only reason he was able to accomplish this feat was because his God realized he was putting too heavy of a burden on his follower and sent the doctor in to literally save his life in between rounds. The other man was Marlon Vera. But getting hit by a semi-truck wouldn't keep Vera down. And judging by the way Figueiredo was looking up at the lights the last time he faced Brandon Moreno, I don't think he has the same chin that Cheeto has.